Before we quick step into the world of dance, though, someone just as vivid and flamboyant, not to say camp, surreal and controversial. Spain's greatest cinematic export since Buñuel is undoubtedly Pedro Almodóvar. From his pop subculture beginnings to his first critically acclaimed success, Almodóvar flaunts comedy, kitsch and satirical melodrama in the face of conventional taste in this recent DVD box set release of 4 of his early works.
Cuidado, que viene la general. Sé que está ahí. Vámonos. Estás guapísimo. ¿Qué hacían ahí? Es una sorpresa.
I'm joined now by Peter Evans, who is Professor of Hispanic Studies at Queen Mary University of London, and by Olvido Salazar-Alonso, Head of Cultural Activities at the Instituto Cervantes. What was the climate culturally like in Madrid in the late 70s when I believe you first met Pedro?
Well, I think it was a very alive moment in Madrid, well, in the whole Spain, because we were in the middle of the transition from the dictatorship, Franco, and we were in the middle of a political transition that has a big influence on what was happening in the cultural world.
Really, there are 2 tendencies, aren't there? I mean, on the one hand, there's the out-and-out commercial tendency. I mean, a lot of films were made which were not prepared to challenge the assumptions or the values of the regime. These are mainstream comedies, musicals, films based on literary works as well. But on the other hand, there were the more dissident directors, some of whom who had paid for their dissidence by being locked up in jail.
This box set is the early Almodóvar films, including his debut feature. I mean, what characterises his early work, would you say, Peter?
Well, I suppose people have referred to this early work as being the equivalent of punk,
right.
in the sense that they're rougher, grainier, wilder films than we've come to expect from Almodóvar in more recent years. Pepe Luz y Bom really is the first attempt to express the return of the repressed in Spanish cinema. Here we're talking about transgressing taboos, discussing various forms of sexuality. It's puerile, it's juvenile, but it's great fun. And I think that characterizes much of the early work. You have to remember that in 1977, you saw the abolition of censorship in the cinema. So in 1980, it's only 3 years later, he lets it all hang out, basically.
Yes, he doesn't explicitly, directly refer to the regime that's gone, does he, to Franco and the regime, but they are they political films, do you think, the early films?
Directly politically, no, but of course it's a rebellion of all the repression that we suffer in terms of sexuality, for example.
Yes.
Although it doesn't speak about politically what was happening, yes, of course it was a rebellion of the 40 years of a dictatorship.
Ah, muy bien, pues vamos allá con elecciones generales. La gran sorpresa de la noche.
Pepe Luz y Bom, I saw it when it came, the first came in 1980, but not many people saw it in the cinema at that time. I think the same with Dark Habits, and What Did I Do to Deserve That? Maybe it was more popular, but really On the Verge, Women on the Verge was the big success, commercial success.
Estoy harta de ser buena.
It begins to attract international appeal. There was even the idea that it would be remade as a Hollywood film. Jane Fonda was being talked about in the Carmen Maura role.
No debería fumar.
Nothing came of it in the end, but clearly he was beginning to make an impact beyond Spain.
Women are really, really important in his films, aren't they?
Yes, always the most important characters, like the other one, the What Did I Do to Deserve?
Yes.
Lo único que tienes que hacer es sentarte cerca de la cama y mirar. Este es un exhibicionista. Jamás cómodo no te lo puedo poner.
Bueno, pero te advierto que como me ponga la mano encima me voy, ¿eh? Que no tengo yo el cuerpo para bromas.
Hola.
Hola, mi amiga y un cliente.
Señora,
Buenas.
siéntense que voy a empezar.
sometimes the woman that appears in their movies, they are a little crazy characters, but I have my feeling seeing he is very interested in women. He knows well, I think, women.
Critically, how did the Spanish press and Spanish critics take to him?
I think there's been a certain tendency to underestimate his work. He's a sort of prophet without honor in his own country. I think that Almodóvar's greatest enthusiasts actually tend to be outside Spain, critically. He's neither out-and-out commercial director, nor is he an out-and-out auteurist director.
Yes.
But clearly that's the appeal of Almodóvar, that he's a mixture of the two, and he makes absolutely no apologies for this. If you look at his films, they're stacked full of references to, on the one hand, popular cinema in Spain, and also popular cinema in Hollywood, and on the other hand, references to Buñuel and so on. Yeah.
Do you think the portrayal of Spain, the Spanish and Spanish culture that Almodóvar gives to the wider world is an accurate one? I mean, for people, if you learned about Spain via Almodóvar, would you be learning the truth about Spain?
Well, I think he has a very particular world.
Yes.
No? I mean, it's his world. And I will say more, it's a picture of Madrid, because Madrid
is it?
Yeah, because he's been very connected to Madrid, and his films, most of them, they take part in the city.
And you were talking then about his critical standing, Peter. I mean, is he a great filmmaker, do you think?
Undoubtedly, undoubtedly. And I think he's one of the most significant directors of the last 20 years or so.
Bebe. Tú también, ¿eh?
And those 4 classic early Almodóvar films are available now.